Hey everybody, and welcome to your show. My name is Andy Stetzinger. Joining me is Ian Cole, and we are going to be talking about the nation of makers. Ian, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I'm
Excellent.
excited to be here. This episode 0, the inaugural episode of whatever this show is going to be.
We've been talking about it for a while. I mean, it's exciting to do it.
We're going to be having a lot of fun with it. We're going to be talking to everybody out there about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and getting a lot of information that they're going to share with us and everybody else. But we want to start with the Nation of Makers. What exactly is the Nation of Makers?
Well, the Nation of Makers is an organization that supports those in the maker movement who help others. So whether it's makerspace organizers or maker event organizers or other groups like museums, science centers, schools, etc., Nation of Makers is really a meta organization. You could think of it almost as like a trade organization. If you're part of a for-profit business, for example, you might have a trade association of people in that industry. And what Nation of Makers can do is help us organize and all get better at what we do collectively.
And what is it that we do collectively, if that's a fair question to ask?
We make a lot of stuff, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, so really this started a few years ago. The Obama administration created the original Nation of Makers program, and then Nation of Makers, the nonprofit, grew out of that program towards the end of the Obama administration. And so what we recognized, there was a great set of gatherings that happened at the White House. That's really funny. So let's just take that as a segue here. So we're actually at Maker FX Makerspace in Orlando, Florida, and this is a new building, and the new building contains an energy management system. And I'm thinking that nobody downstairs is actually going to go turn the lights on. Hey, there we are. Thank you, Rue. And we've been talking about it's a 4-hour timer.
4-hour timer, yeah.
And we've been talking about hacking that. We just hit a year in this building, and we still have not done that. So the good news is it's actually an energy management system, and the lights turn off at some point. The bad news is you could be using a table saw when the lights turn off. So bad makers, we gotta fix that.
I always set an Alexa timer to remind me, but then I forget what I set the alarm for, and it goes off. And I'm like, why is that alarm going on?
Like, what was I supposed to do?
What was I? Yeah,
you're supposed to record a podcast. I'm sure. So,
exactly
sort of back to Nation of Makers and what the organization is about. There were some great convenings that the Obama administration held. And really what it did is it got together groups of event organizers and makerspace organizers and other organizations who were very active in the maker movement. And by getting people together, these convenings, you start to realize that we have a lot of common challenges and a lot of common ground and a lot of things that, if we could solve that collectively, it could save us a lot of time, right? Why are we all fighting at the makerspace level to find good insurance? And that's one of the projects that's happening as part of Nation of Makers, is actually going out, understanding what the needs are of makerspaces, and then meeting with the insurance community to try to get that classified properly and make it really easy so that a new makerspace can just call any agent and say, hey, I'm a makerspace, this is how many members I have, this is what equipment we have, and get insurance. And so you can sort of take that example and multiply it out by a number of things, and those are the types of programs that Nation of Makers is undertaking. As well, I mentioned the word convening. Mm-hmm. We have the first annual Nation of Makers convention coming up. We call it NOMCON, right? Really super original naming. But June 9th and 10th in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Actually, just booked all my travel and.
Are you doing the train?
Doing a little bit of train. I'm not. There was discussion of. The bunch of people from the West Coast are taking the train into Santa Fe, and so we were actually discussing flying direct to LA and then taking Amtrak back just to hang out with our friends on the train. The timing just didn't work out.
Gotcha.
We are gonna do a little Amtrak on the way back, not the whole way back, but we're gonna hit a couple cities and do that on the way
Very
back,
cool.
which should be nice.
Very cool. So that's coming up in what was the dates again for that?
June 9th and 10th.
So that's right around the corner.
In Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, New Mexico, June 9th and 10th for NOMCON.
Yep. So that's going to be exciting, and we'll I think in the next few episodes we'll talk more about NOMCON. We'll get Andrew Coy and Dorothy Jones Davis. Dorothy's our executive director for Nation of Makers, so we'll get them on, and we'll have them tell us more about what to expect at the conference. I think the agenda is coming out any day now. I got a sneak peek, and it's going to be a good conference when you look at the agenda and you're really having a hard time deciding which session you're going to go to, because there's so many great speakers. The other neat thing is I look forward to connecting with a bunch of different people that I've met online only, that I'll get to meet in person for the convention, and that's going to be neat, because I mean you can build a great relationship using the digital tools that we have, but there's also something to meet in face to face.
So you mentioned a little earlier about the collaborative ideas. So a lot of what I'm gathering, there's a lot of Fab Labs or maker spaces or any type of organization faces a lot of common issues. Mm-hmm. And it's not something through Nation of Makers, it's not something that organization has to face alone. It's not something, it's a roadmap of sorts where they could come in and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with whatever it is. I don't understand this, or hey, why can't I get this approved? And what I'm understanding is anybody within the Nation of Makers goes, you know what? We've been there, we've done that. Let me tell you how we solved it, and maybe that can help you.
Yeah, I think there's some really great examples of that. After the Makerspace organizers convening at the White House, we created a Facebook group. Actually, the group got created to organize the dinner that we had that night, but it turned into something much bigger. We've got over 1,000 people in it now. So that's Nation of Makers Makerspace organizers on Facebook. But you can go in that group and you'll see people will say, example would be someone today posted that they're looking for a great solution for managing volunteers, but very specifically, she was looking for a self-registration system for volunteers. And that was an example where I saw that post and was able to say, hey, we use volunteers for Salesforce for the production of our Maker Faire. Now, in this case, she's not a Maker Faire producer, but she could use that same technology to run their events. And then what's interesting is, like, you answered that one person's question, and then I saw other people starting to be tagged. And when you see that name only tag on one, that's somebody saying, oh, look, we're trying to solve this in our own space, and let me tag this other person so that they can do it. Or, we need to transfer this to our makerspace, for example, or our maker, Maker Faire or other maker events. So there's a lot of just, really straightforward, hey, how do you approach this? How do you approach that? And I pick up tips daily out of that group. And so I think what you see through Nation of Makers is you see sort of that informal discussion that happens a lot, that I think it also kind of helps you realize you're not alone. Because sometimes when you're running one of these from a community perspective, it's really easy to feel like, oh, I've got to solve all of these things. When a lot of people have already done and solved some of these things. And so being able to transfer those best practices is great. And so we're seeing that already. I mean, still in the early days of Nation of Makers, we're seeing that informal. And then what the team is working on are larger, more formal ways of sharing as well, so that things that are maybe a little more business oriented, like insurance or dealing with conflict. I got to tell you, there's a session that I saw proposed for the conference, and I really hope it ends up being one of the speakers, but it's basically how to deal with bullies in your makerspace.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that is great, because no matter what you do, you always end up in any organization of a certain size, you end up with somebody like that. Anyway, just a lot of good best practice sharing, and I know I personally pick up a lot from it, and we see a lot of others picking up from it as well. And similarly, that same type of discussion happens between Maker Faire producers. Now, Maker Media runs what's a mobilized site that has the Maker Faire producers in it. So some of that's happening through Maker Media's work, but you also see some bleed over with a lot of the same people that are part of, Nation of Makers. They also help run a Maker Faire. They also help run a makerspace, and so the organizer types really, often are way overcommitted and in the middle of all of these things. I'm guilty.
So, and forgive me if I'm talking out of turn here on this one,
Yeah.
but would Nation of Makers also be something where if, for instance, somebody was they had a makerspace or a fab lab and they were trying to purchase a particular piece of equipment for it, and they want to know the best route or who to contact
Yeah.
or how to get funding for it, would that be something that eventually Nation of Makers will have almost like a boilerplate or a white paper and go, here's your paper, fill it out, and here's all the information you've got, and go contact this person at this organization, and they'll have everything you need? Is that too much? Or is that too far in the future
No,
for it? Or?
I think conceptually you're there, right? I would say that, and we would need to have some others that are a little closer to it. So, I mean, I was there during the early formation of the organization, and I serve on the board, but I don't necessarily see all the details of all the programs. But I think conceptually you've got the right idea. If there is a challenge that is faced by someone in the maker movement that is an organizer, I think we would eventually, as Nation of Makers, either informally or formally work to address that challenge.
Now, what all?
And discounts.
Oh,
So that's a
yeah,
good
that's
example. Sorry, you
huge.
mentioned
No, yeah.
purchasing. I have not. I don't know anything formally, but I know the team is working on some discount programs so that Nation of Makers members will be able to go and use that for discounts on tools or other things. And I think even more than that, I think we ought to make sure that we share the existing discounts that are out there. So as an example, Vectric VCarve Pro, they have a Makerspace edition, and I run into people all the time who don't know that, right? Or who there's a lot of general discounts for 501c3 nonprofits. Not every space or fair or whatever is a nonprofit, but if you are, and I will occasionally post about some of those, and it's always interesting to me because people will say, like, I had no idea that I could go get $5,000 from Microsoft for Azure a year, or that I could get $10,000 a month in Google AdWords advertising. So I think just raising the awareness of that will go a long way.
Yeah, it's I mentioned before, it's the roadmap. You guys have traveled it collectively. You've traveled a lot of roads, and you're basically creating a roadmap for the rest of your fellow organizers. Now, you had a Venn diagram that you showed me earlier that has what encompasses, or what groups kind of encompass Nation of Makers. And I know it doesn't show up that great on the screen behind us, but I don't know if you could pull it up and kind of talk a little bit about that, because it is a number of different groups that it encompasses. So we have maker event organizers, maker space organizers, and organizations and institutions. And so all these groups come together to form the Nation of Makers. And those are pretty large groups in and of themselves that can encompass a lot of different titles underneath there.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember about Nation of Makers is that we are intended to be a meta organization, right? So we are not our mission does not involve helping end makers, right? That's what the maker spaces do. That's what the maker organizations do, right? We are there to help those who are helping others. Doesn't mean that we won't, occasionally get involved in something, but just in general, that's the way to think about it. It's a quick funny story. when we were forming the nonprofit, and we did it in very very quick turn. I found myself at 1 a.m. once buying a textbook on meta organizations. It was like
Okay.
a textbook on meta organization theory,
like
because we
it.
were
I
trying to
like it.
decide, like, who are we and who are we here to serve and what are we doing? We kept using the term meta organization, and one day, I don't know, we were on a conference call and somebody's like, is that actually a term? Like, is there a next thing I know, the calls over it, we did a lot of like 9 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Sure, I can see
Eastern
that,
time
yep.
conversations. And next thing I know, I'm buying a textbook on meta organizations, which was actually great because it really talked about the role of an organization, the role of a meta organization, the role of a meta organization.
Wow.
But I think that's just most of the folks that you find in that Venn diagram that are in the maker movement are learners, and so I think that's an example where we want to make an organization, right? So we learned and worked together on that, and it's fun stuff.
So going back to the examples, now we have a lot of different groups that you could give examples to that could help. And I've already mentioned, we mentioned purchasing, we've mentioned paperwork, we've mentioned legal. This is kind of like a lot of high level stuff. Are there any, I don't want to call it low hanging fruit, but is there any something like that becomes so blatantly simple that you do something and you share that and everybody goes, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of this? That is a brilliant idea.
I mean, everyone's coming at organizing from a very different perspective, right? So, we run into school teachers who are trying to start a space within their school or even just within their classroom. And so what might be obvious to one person about how to do something is just completely different perspective for another, right? There are maker fairs or maker events of all sizes in very different cities around the world now, where there are spaces in schools, there's community spaces, there's spaces that are more headed towards incubators, there's kid focused spaces. So I don't know that there are really the blatantly obvious things. I think we need to share what's working, and it's also important to share what doesn't work.
Good point.
I think
Very
it's
good point.
really easy to. I try to remember to curate my failures on social media as much as I curate my successes, because people need to know that the path is bumpy, right? We were working. You and I were here. We're Friday night, right? And I made the same mistake on something, and I kept making the same mistake. You even told me. So we were actually cutting some heat transfer vinyl on the laser. And yes, before you message us and tell us that you can't cut vinyl on a laser, turns out that heat transfer vinyl isn't actually vinyl; it's polyurethane, and you can cut on laser. Anyway, so I was making it to try to test on these inexpensive polyester backpacks, and I was going to put it in the heat press, and just wanted to make sure it would work. And so I was cutting out some art, and I kept forgetting to reverse the image. And the bad part was it 2 nights before, I had wasted like 8 feet of vinyl from forgetting to reverse the image. But and so I make lots of little lists, right? If you look on the laser here, there's like a pre-flight checklist, and it's because I forget to do this. Usually I'm talking or I'm on Facebook Live or whatever, and so so you gotta tell people we're all human, we make mistakes, and so I think sharing some of the challenges, and I mentioned it earlier, like you want to make sure people know they're not alone, that
Huge.
they also face that, and I think that's true anytime we get a group of organizer types together. We realize, oh wow, we actually face a lot of the same challenges. So, have you ever seen the running a hackerspace Tumblr?
I have not. No.
Okay, so running a hackerspace on Tumblr is a group of people who obviously have run hackerspaces. You can argue whether a hackerspace and a makerspace is the same thing, but let's just go with they're roughly synonymous at the moment. And it's somebody who's created a bunch of memes specifically about that. And anytime I'm super frustrated with some problem in the makerspace environment, I go look at that and I realize, okay, other people are dealing with it to the point that, there's memes about it. Let's have a laugh. Let's remember, and let's, we'll move on.
But a lot of that, as you said, that's the community aspect of it, that you realize you're not fighting that fight alone.
Yeah.
And that there's going to be somebody else that has that shared experience with you. And for the least amount that you're going to get over there is somebody who understands.
Yeah.
And that is vitally important in any organization, to have someone that can understand where you're coming from and can understand the problems that you're facing.
Yeah.
Now, last week, I saw you downstairs in our classroom. You had just come back from, I think, Harbor Freight. And you were vigorously going through a lot of large boxes of stuff that we used to take to all of our events.
Yep.
And condensing them down into smaller, portable, swag grab-and-go containers. Do you have one of those anywhere around that you could show?
Yeah, let me grab.
Yeah, sure. No, do that. I'll give you guys the play-by-play. He's headed over to the side. We're upstairs in the makerspace here at Maker Effects in Orlando, and he's gone into the corner by a bunch of, I don't know, it looks like there's a Stormtrooper helmet over there, an X-Wing fighter helmet, a ladder, and this. And this is one of several of these that you have. You do this. I'm going to grab the other camera and kind of wiggle it over here.
All right, well, this is, it's a simple example, right? The labels say swag, grab-and-go box. For those who know me, I am addicted to swag. So if you meet me at an event, I probably will hand you a sticker or a button or whatever. So it's my inner marketer. But what we found was I was dragging just tons and tons and tons of stuff to. Are you gonna switch
we're gonna get
cameras there?
fancy
Oh, boy,
here.
I
Sorry,
can't
guys.
handle all this. But what I found was we were dragging way too many boxes of stuff to our events, and it was because the stickers and the buttons and everything, and we were carrying around, we'd carry around 10 pounds of each of these things, and I'd never really organized it. And so I said, hey, let me take some time, and these are Makey, temporary tattoos, and we've got stickers for the maker space. We've got also, I love to make, my thing is I like to make acrylic keychains.
Chains, yeah.
And so what I did was I organized them like this. I'm not going to hit the mic this time.
But it makes such a cool sound.
It does make a cool sound. And so I organized them literally for grab and go. And so now if we need to go to an event, I can feel pretty confident just grabbing one of these. And so I put two of them here at the space, and then I made a bigger one of like excess stock. I'm just going to set this down here
Sure.
right now. And then I also left one. Candy thought it was my wife thought it was such a great idea. She said, "Where's mine?"
Oh no!
So when I was cleaning up here the other night, I was finding more stuff still, and so I made a third one and left it at home. And to your point, I shared a picture of that on the Makerspace Organizers group, which took me 10 seconds more than doing it, and a number of people were like, well, duh. It's a great idea. Why didn't we think of that?
Right.
And those Harbor Freight things were like $5 each. Or
they're
so.
relatively inexpensive, and it becomes very easy if you have one of your volunteers in your organization come forward and say, "Hey, I've got an event at the school." Instead of you going, well, it's in the lock cabinet behind the refrigerator to the left of the Yoda, because that's where we normally keep stuff.
And
left
some of this
Yoda.
stuff's expensive, right? If you took an entire box of the stickers, you might have $400 or $500 of stickers. So you kind of also if one box got lost, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's easier to manage or not lost. Or if you go into an event and people might like stickers at that event, and all your stickers get used up. Which is fine. It's what they're there for, but you kind of want to spread that around across the year.
Right.
It becomes easier to, in a way, budget that. But that is a nice idea that got shared. Some people said that is a fantastic idea. You shared exactly where you got it. They're probably doing it now. And it makes it that much easier. And that's one of the things I like about the collaborative organization space, if you will, because those efforts and those ideas that somebody has, and they share that idea or they share that revelation that they had, somebody else might have been fighting that and just not gotten to that point yet and did the same thing. Like, it's perfectly obvious to me now, I should have been doing this and I wasn't doing this. Thank you. You got me there. And that is worth everything in any organization, in any community, to be able to give back to anybody and receive that willfully and freely like that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that drew me to spending time in the maker movement, is because it is a group of people who believe that if you work hard, you can actually change the world. And I like hanging around positive people. I mean, it's kind of simple. And I like hanging out with people who work hard, and I appreciate that ethic. But it also tends to be a lot of learners, a lot of people who openly share knowledge, and everybody talks about social media and bubbles and all that, right? And 2 years ago, I decided to completely upend the Facebook algorithm, for example. So I sent friend requests to hundreds of makerspace organizers and maker event organizers. And I got to tell you, my Facebook feed is nothing but maker awesomeness now.
I should do that, because right now mine's nothing but embroidery ads.
Well, that's because you're hanging out with me, and we restored an embroidery machine together. But so hey, you've been asking me a ton of questions. I think it's my turn. So,
all right.
How? I see. I should know this, right? But you've been coming to Maker Effects how long now?
Since December, January, really. So.
Wow.
So in December,
it's only been a couple months.
It's only been a couple months. So
and we already we have you here doing podcasts
I know, it's
already.
Crazy.
All right, this is awesome.
It's great. So I got my my first 3D printer in December.
You totally took my thing. Like I was totally going to introduce and talk about 3D printing. All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I got my first 3D printer in December, and
really,
yeah,
just December.
Just December,
like
Christmas.
Just past December.
Yeah, Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah. And
this guy learns fast.
Well, I decided that instead of making all the mistakes that I was making, I should find somebody who made the mistakes already and would be able to steer me around said mistakes.
We could teach you how to make the mistakes.
How to make them
faster.
Even better. Yes. And so I Googled, and I found that there was a maker space roughly, 8 minutes from my house. And I wished my wife well, and told her if she needed me, she would. Here's the address, and
I saw her visit you here the other night.
She did.
Yeah.
She came and visited.
Yeah.
She has visitation rights here at the Makerspace. It's all good. No, I'm kidding. So no, I came in here the first time, and it was an open make on a Friday night. I walked in the door, and it was immediate having conversations with people, and I was like, this is beyond anything. And I have had previous experiences with other makerspaces, and it was like, I'm not trying to give Makerspace or Maker Effects rather a huge commercial here. That's not what this is about. But it doesn't compare to anything else in town. And I was immediately,
There's some great spaces.
There
in
are,
town.
there
There's
are,
some great
but
spaces
this one spoke to me more than any of the other ones did.
Because it's 8 miles from your house.
That's probably
or 8 minutes from your house. Let's be real. Geographically
speaking,
yeah.
this outweighs. But no, in all reality, it's a great team here, a great group of people here. I immediately knew I wanted to be involved.
Now, was that the night I put you to work making T-shirts, or was that a different night?
That was the second night I was here.
Second
that was so I that wasn't even an open make night. I had joined a Slack because the very first thing he told me to do was go join our Slack. I'm like, okay, I'll go join the Slack. And
speaking of, we should remember later. There's a Nation of Makers.
There is a Nation of Makers Slack,
and we should cover that anyway. Keep going.
And so I joined a Slack, and I saw you post that you were going to be up here on a Thursday night making shirts for an outreach event.
Yep.
And I said, well, and you said if anybody wants to come up and help, or keep me company, feel free. I was like, well, I've never made a T-shirt, but I can go hang out and keep somebody company. That sounds easy. So 8 minutes from the house, here I come. I walk in, and I see you in the back in the corner, and you're like, hey, you ever made T-shirts? I'm like, no. You're like, well, come here, let me show you how to do it. I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. And you do this, you do that, and you're like, you got it? Yep, great. And you walked away. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm making T-shirts.
The Makerspace experience.
He stayed a little bit. I'll give him that.
Yeah,
he stayed a couple times, but then another guy comes in who I've never met before, you never met before, and you asked me, you said, Andy, what is the next thing you do once you learn how to do something? And I went, teach it? And you went, yep. And then you walked away for good. And me and this guy had never met before, and I've never seen since, end up making shirts the rest of the night.
Yeah.
And it was hot. No, it wasn't hot. It was kind of cool that night, actually. But we had a great time back there, and it was a fantastic experience doing that.
Very
so
cool.
that was my introduction to Maker Effects. Go make T-shirts.
So when you're not messing with your 3D printer
Yeah.
or being indentured labor at the makerspace, I think you got kind of a cool story. So tell us what you do.
I'm a full-time podcaster. I have a back.
Wait, that's actually a paying thing?
It's a paying thing. You
Whoa.
can make it work if you work hard and know what to do. You can make it work. So I have a background in IT infrastructure, and
I'm sorry.
I know I got to the point where I decided that I was seeing more of the inside of a server closet than I was of my family, and I decided I needed to make a change in my life, and made a change in my life, and that change eventually led me to becoming a full-time podcaster. I've been podcasting for over 20 years, off and on with different shows. If you want to go back and really, really track back to my initial days of podcasting, it was before it was even called podcast, and I was in third grade back in the 70s, and me and my buddies had a tape recorder, and we would tape record our conversations and make copies of the tape recording and pass them around and charge $1 to each one. So I was already monetizing the network back then. So it goes way back. But in March of last year...
You made mixtapes too, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I bet you did. I could just see that now.
I made some really good mixtapes. And then CDs. When CDs came out, I made really good mix, like club and house and a lot of stuff you wouldn't... Anyhow.
That was a tangent, sorry.
But now I want to go make another mixtape. So in March of last year, I decided I wanted to do this full time. Now, unlike a lot of other podcasters, I have always built studios. I found that I'm a lousy podcaster when it comes to me not being in person with somebody else. I like the interaction that I can have with the person right next to me or across the table from me versus across the nation from me, which I still do that. I've got shows that I do that way, but I much prefer being in the same spot, the same physical spot as somebody. So I've always been building micro studios. And I'm up to like my 5th iteration of my micro studio. And
you rolled in here with a pretty impressive bag of gear for a portable setup.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, there's like a whole thing here.
It's wires. Wires are everywhere. But it's one of those things where I have to be in contact with somebody. I run a lot of different shows. I'll either engineer them for people, record them for people, edit them for people, or then have my own where I'm hosting or co-hosting the different shows. So I run the gamut of the pod. I also run the Orlando Podcast Meetup Group, where we talk about everything in podcasting in general, and just give away a lot of everything that I can and help people get over whatever hurdle that they are experiencing in their podcasting journey.
So I watched one of your podcasts recently. I think it's called the Innkeepers podcast.
Yeah, so it's really interesting on the Innkeepers podcast, and you've already talked about this. I actually recorded that one here at the Maker, which is probably why
that
you
may have been
watched
watching. Yeah, exactly.
And it is, in and of itself, it is a meta organization, and it's a podcast for that meta organization. So in the gaming world of Hearthstone, which is a Blizzard card game, the people who host events for people to come and gather and play competitively together, they're called innkeepers. And the spaces that people go play and the venues that they gather in are called taverns. And there's a whole vernacular for the whole thing. And
there were definitely points in the podcast where I had no idea what you're talking about. Like, this is a completely different world. I need to call my kids and get a translation.
What is he talking about here? So, but it's very interesting the parallels that what you and I are doing here, how they parallel the Innkeeper podcast, because the Innkeeper podcast is a podcast for people who are putting on events for the Hearthstone community games. And we talk about the issues and the problems and ideas, and we share side event ideas and ways to improve the venues and we share all this common information. We have a Discord server instead of a Slack server. There's 400 people or something in that thing, and it's very similar to Nation of Makers. It really parallels, but you guys are doing it like on this official level, and we're just like, hey, we're playing games. So
you can learn a lot from making. You can learn a lot from gaming.
I agree.
Right? There's no. I think there's plenty of studies that show whatever you do to get the mind open, then you can push some content in after that.
What was interesting about the show that the particular episode you watched in our circle of innkeepers. There is at least one other maker in that circle besides myself. And we
probably
had
a bunch more. They just don't know it yet.
I totally agree. And there are, because there are people who do, they may do one or two little things, but they're making stuff. I'm like, you're a maker, you made that. And they just haven't made that that jump.
Well, what I loved about that episode is that you and the other gentleman, what was his name?
That would be, I'll let you ask me.
Oh, put you on the spot. Anyway,
no, I'll get it. Ben Reddington from Wichita.
There you go. You two were you were geeking out about the swag that you make for hosting your tournaments, and as I said, I have a small problem with swag, right? So I love the fact that you were talking about a combination of things. One thing I took away was you were talking about the importance of the innkeeper groups getting out in their community and meeting other people, which is good for, it's outreach, right? Mm-hmm. It brings other people in. And second, you were talking about using makerspace facilities to make swag for gaming tournaments, and I thought that was a really good tie-in. So it wasn't just that you were at a makerspace. It wasn't sort of this whole random like, hey, there's this other world out here. It was, hey, there's this other world out here, and here's how it can very, very directly benefit you, as an organizer, mm-hmm. as an innkeeper. In this space, and I found that compelling.
Yeah, that's I do a lot of 3D printing for that.
A lot of yeah, you print a lot of Hearthstones, right?
Yes, I do.
So, and so you and I've had this conversation. I thought it actually went on longer than that, but if we've only actually known each other for a couple months, it's kind of surprising because I think we've been talking a lot. But you and I have been talking about how to leverage podcasting as one of the channels to meet the goals that we have with Nation of Makers. And so thank you for getting involved. Thank you for bringing your skills at podcasting to help the rest of Nation of Makers. And I'm really, really looking forward to, I think you and I have talked about doing this on some frequency. I'll let you talk about format in a second. I'm looking forward to really being able to highlight the amazing people that are part of the organizer groups out there, right? When you and I started talking about potential guests, it's endless, right? Yeah. There's just so many amazing people that we know in the makerspace, maker organizer institution space that are just fantastic people. We've got some great ones on the board that I look forward to us talking to. And so anyway, why don't you talk about format for a little bit? What do you see with us as we move this forward in the coming weeks?
Sure, and a lot of it's going to be just normal organic growth of a show. So we will be doing things, and some things may work really well, some things may not, but we're still going to try them.
In other words, you're kicking me off of here. No,
you're
got
it. So we'll be bringing people in via Skype who aren't in our local areas. We'll be talking to them about whatever organization that they are, whatever role they play in Nation of Makers. We'll be asking them for tips. We'll be asking them for stories about how they overcame something that was an obstacle in their space and whatever they're doing. We'll be learning from them and sharing those lessons with everybody out there. And I want it to be more of a dynamic environment. It will be a live show. We will be entertaining live questions from the chat room, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on Twitch, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on all three of them simulcast all together.
Time zoners will probably be a little fun, right? If we're doing live, we'll have to work on that.
It'll get interesting.
Maybe we'll change it up once in a while.
Yeah, it's one of those things, we being East Coast, and it's Florida, we might be our own time zone here pretty soon.
East Coast?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even more east, just Florida. I guess what they're going to call it, Atlantic time zone or something.
For those who haven't heard, Florida has a bill that actually passed the Florida legislature to basically remain on what is our daylight savings time. So we'd be like GMT -4 permanently.
Permanently,
right?
Yeah.
Which, as someone who enjoys sunlight in the evenings and later hours for things, I embrace this. For someone who has a systems background, I immediately think of all the work that has to change. It's really funny to see friends how they fall in one camp or the other. Like, but the code, there's so much to. Anyway, I'm sure we'll all figure it. I guess it requires ratification at the national level.
But the tourism industry.
Yeah. I get it.
They're gonna love it.
I get it. Hey, if it means later hours at the theme park,
and more money being spent, it's all good. That's all fine.
Anyway.
So, but yeah, we will work on the time frame a little bit because it will be kind of difficult difficult to do for the West Coasters. And we want to be inclusive of everybody. So we may vary our times from time to time.
Yeah.
We're not set on any major schedule. And I'm also going to say that it's not something that if you are a whatever role you're playing in the Nation of Makers and you want to be a part of what we're doing and you say, look, I can do Tuesdays at 10 a.m. and that's it. Fine. We'll find a way to get you via Skype to have the conversation.
Have to schedule it, a month out to do it.
Yeah, or whatever the case might be. We can get it on and we can just bring that in and play that video as if it were live and fool everybody. No, I wouldn't do that. But we let you guys know that it was pre-recorded. But it's something we want to be very inclusive. We want to be learning, always learning. So if there are ideas or suggestions that you guys have on some content or material that you'd like us to cover on the show, we're always going to be open for that as well.
Oh, this crowd has a lot of suggestions. You're going to get more.
I'm going to get bombarded. That's fantastic, though.
No, it's good. It's good.
That means less creative work on my side, but we'll work all of those in that we can work in.
Can we? I think we can get some news.
Always
into the format too.
Sure, we can break out. We
usually something going on.
Something going on. We can break into with news, cover the news a little bit in the beginning, get people's opinion on the news. We'll always cover
not the news.
Yeah,
I hit the mic again. Wow, that is a great
it
sound.
Isn't it the bong? He's going to record. Just isolate that.
Yeah. So, I think we'll probably need to figure out what passes the threshold of sort of interesting news items.
Well,
but
I kind of think it'd be anything that you would normally see in the Nation of Makers Facebook feed.
Okay,
would be something that we would cover here on the podcast that we have. And we'll be looking for suggestions from you guys.
Grant opportunities, ways to get funding. Yeah, I mean, hey, we miss them all the time, right? You find out about a grant way too late to actually work on it. So you make a note for it the following year, and you hope it comes back. Or collaboration opportunities, or major new events. So.
And then even down to the space level, whatever kind of space you've got, if you're having an event at your space, then and you know that, hey, this is going to be this particular weekend in our town is a high tourism week. That's why we're having our event this week. We can make that known for everybody too. So
you're going to get bombarded with,
which is fine. It's great, and send in your artwork, and we'll incorporate that in there as well.
So I think just like the maker spaces that I've talked to and the maker events I've talked to, I think it's you get into it with a goal or with a set of goals, and you get some passionate people involved, and then you figure out how to make it better across time. So I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, and that's what I meant about the organic growth of the show, because what we have in our vision and now for it could change by the next time we do this.
Right.
And so it's something that's going to be always dynamically growing and changing for the better over time. It's just one of those things until we get into the natural pattern of it, and then it becomes what it is.
I think the guests will make it, right? I mean, the goal of this isn't to record you and I, chatting
get bored
each
with
week.
us.
This is just this is episode 0.
Yeah, this is the primer for you guys.
Right. Attack of Us.
Attack of Us. That'd be great. So we're nameless right now.
We are nameless.
So that's out there.
We've gone back and forth, right? We had I think one sort of way too easy thing because the Nation of Makers convention ended up being called NOMCON. I started abbreviating this NOMCast. But I think that gets old after a while, and I think and so we were actually talking at dinner because Mexican food helps the brain, and I think it's a really good thing. I look forward to getting some input from the community once we go out there and tell everyone we're doing this. I think there'll be some great suggested names.
Yeah, I can already see. I don't know what the name is going to be, but when it comes up, we're both going to go,
whoa.
Yeah, why didn't we think of that?
So obvious.
Just like your box of toys over there. I'm sorry, swag, sorry. Tools. That's why I have to remind my wife, my 3D printer is a tool.
Yes.
Not a toy, a tool. All three of them.
I want to make a joke, but I won't. Okay, so we've got we're getting set up. We know where we're going to record. We have a basic format. We've already got a couple of guests that have agreed
lined up. I'm excited
to come on. What else do we need to do?
I'll probably figure out where we're going to live, where the show is going to live, and where
You don't
people.
mean like where we physically are. You
No, it's
mean
like, are we going to? Is the show going to live like primarily on?
channels.
Yeah, is it going to be on Facebook? Is it going to be on a particular
Okay.
website?
So we've got some distribution.
Yeah,
to
there's some
figure
distribution
out.
channels
Okay.
to figure out,
All right.
and then we have to streamline our guest experience. There's a lot of things, behind the scenes that we need to do.
Right.
But for the most part, I think we've got a great setup so far.
Okay.
We're off to a phenomenal start. I know we have some of our members here who are going to be contributing some additional audio equipment and visual equipment, some lighting.
Yeah, I think we'll, today it took us a while to get set up. So what we're talking about doing is sort of building a little mini booth that we
Yeah.
can use
It'll be
to do this.
studio number 6 for me.
Studio number 6 for you.
Can we just call it Studio 6?
Can we
Make everybody else
can
trying to
we make
figure
it Studio 3.14?
Just
Studio
call it.
Pi? I don't know.
Well, can we get a pie-shaped table?
Sure we can. We have a CNC router.
We can do anything.
Why would you ask such a question? So, hey, let's take a minute and go back and talk about
Sure.
NOMCON,
Yes,
right? I
please,
mean, I
please,
think
please, please.
I think it would be a big miss. So, again, Santa Fe, New Mexico, June 9th and 10th. If you don't recognize that guy, word on the street is that he's going to be there. So he recorded a great video for. Okay, zoom back out. Anyway. I can't use the computer again. There we go.
We're working on this.
Yeah.
So the overall theme of NOMCON for this year is intentional inclusion.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So that's a great topic. I'm glad you brought that up. The maker community overall, when we get together and we talk about goals that we have, you hear a lot around diversity and inclusion, and I know it's something that Dorothy, as our executive director, is extremely passionate about, and I think that would be a really, really good topic when she comes on the show. I think we should definitely have her talk to how we can all take. I think there's a series of small steps we can take over time that will help us ensure that we do make our spaces and our events accessible and inclusive to other people. And I hope that with the conference being themed intentional inclusion, I'm hoping there's a number of really good talks and lessons there that we can pick up. We spend time each year for Maker Faire Orlando, for example, talking about everything from how do we keep the ticket price low so that those who want to attend, that maybe they can't. There's a lot of people who can't go attend MegaCon. They can't go to or Dragon Con or whatever, Comic Con, whatever the big con is near you. Those tickets are often $80, $100
Or more,
or
yeah.
more.
$200, $300 sometimes.
Big expensive, right? So, or perhaps they don't have some of the educational opportunities, right? So I think we try to figure out, how do we keep the event cost down just so that it is more accessible to other people, and that's just one little example. And I think we can do a really good job as a community of making sure that everyone feels welcome in our community, and not only feeling welcome, but also how do we reach out and how do we actually invite them in and say, hey, you are welcome, and we have programs that are available to all, but come hang out with us, come benefit from this, or come work with us. And I think that's where the outreach that we do in the community goes a long way. And so many spaces and events and institutions are just doing amazing things. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that it is, potentially inclusive. So I don't explain it nearly as well as Dorothy could. I think.
Well, you wouldn't want to steal her thunder either. So.
Well, and I'm just not capable. So, I think that was a big. What's great about Dorothy is she really does have that deep-seated caring for others, that is very prevalent in the maker community, and I think that's one of the things that makes her great at her job, and I look forward to having her on as a guest, and I look forward to the convention. But if you go to the website, you can learn more about it. It's nomcon.org. There's everything around the conference. We've actually been planning it collaboratively. So if you are an organizer type and you want to get involved, you can actually go on and you can see this community section here. It's kind of hard to see on the screen behind us, but you can join the community planning calls. You can volunteer. You can suggest ideas. Yeah, we're only like 50-something days away, so I don't know the idea suggestion. We may be getting tight on time, but you can actually, you can get on our Nation of Makers Slack, which is a great place to start. If you do join the Slack and you can tell us that you heard about it on the podcast, that would be awesome. Anyway, so, typical maker community ethos, right? Get in, get involved. It's all open. See how it's being done, and join us. And thank you to the city of Santa Fe, and you can see all the partners that are part of that and helping us host it. And there's a bunch of those who provided dollar funding as well. So it's all coming together. It's super exciting. You can get the tickets right online. There is a pay what you can model. And if anybody has any questions, there's links on there, or reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with you as well.
Now you've mentioned a couple of times the NOMCON Slack.
Yes.
So
it's actually the Nation of Makers Slack.
Sorry.
And it looks like you can get an invitation from the NOMCON website under, where was it? Under Community.
There it is. Yep.
It says Slack. Can I click on Slack invitation? Look, I can actually.
You give it your name, first name, last name, and email.
Yep,
that'll get you an invite.
You can get that invite. You can also, and then the other thing I mentioned was if you go to Facebook, the Makerspace Organizers page, and I'll give you a hint. If you go to makerspaceorganizers.org.
Makerspaceorganizers.org.
That I can't type like this.
I know you're like all stretched out. You're not used to it. It's okay.
I couldn't never.
Okay, so that automatically forwards on.
It'll take you right to that group on Facebook. That was just a little domain redirect that I set up.
So what was it again?
Makerspaceorganizers.org.
Right,
or you go to Facebook and search for Makerspace Organizers, and you'll see it. There's also, since we're rolling out social media here, there's a Nation of Makers page on Facebook. Nation of Makers is also on Twitter. And pick your channel. And I guess we'll be probably using this to maybe start a YouTube channel.
Sure, might as well
talk about it.
Yeah, as many pipes as you can get, I think. That's how it
so
works.
what did we not hit tonight?
Wow, I think we've covered a lot. We've covered basically who we are, what we're doing, who you guys are, and what you're doing. How we plan to interface with everybody, and what we're going to be talking about. You showed off some stuff here. We've done a lot.
Swag case.
Yeah. I think we've covered a lot for our inaugural episode.
All right. Well, thank you again for setting this up.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
I'm sure we will go debrief now and figure out what we're going to do differently for episode 1. So
awesome.
We'll talk about what worked and what didn't work. And then later, my kid, who's a huge Star Wars geek, he'll tell us what order you watch the episodes in, right?
Oh, yeah. Did we cover that?
No.
Okay. I was missing it for some reason. I was like, did we cover the order of the episodes? Did I miss that?
No, it's every time I hear episode number, I have my kid in my head talking about, you got to watch them and you got to watch them.
There's a specific order. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know what they are, but. And
he starts talking about canon.
Ooh.
We'll have done this right when people start talking about canon for the podcast, right? Can we have our own in-jokes?
We have
Can
to.
we do that?
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
part. I think that's part of the podcasting culture. Is you have your own. That normally picks up when you have like a chat room and they get involved in the joke.
So we need you to give us in jokes.
There you go.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm learning.
Yeah.
Thank you much, sir.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you, Andy.
And thank you guys. And if you are having the opportunity to watch this episode, let us know what you think and let us know what you'd like to see.